Hello everyone, it's me John and welcome to another edition of BrainScratch. I hope you've had a nice week and I hope this kicks off a great weekend for each and every one of you. Today we're going to go into a little recent Hollywood history. Unfortunately, a Hollywood tragedy, something that people might almost compare with the Marilyn Monroe death. We are talking about Brittany Murphy and Simon Monjack, and I have to thank all of you because my channel has now gotten to the size where I am getting offers of free books regularly, and I was contacted by a publishing company specifically about a book on this case, and I will be reviewing that book on Geek and Dorks Reviews next week. But in reading that book, it just got me so interested into looking into more about this case. I wanted to jump right out there and do a brain scratch on it. And the brain scratch is basically a component to the book. There is plenty of details in the book that I'm not going to go into, and I'll tell you more about those on the review next week. But there was one thing that I feel like the book left out and I wanted to chase down. So by the end of this episode, we're going to get into some more information on that, quote, missing piece. But thank you so much to the publisher for sending it to me. And before we start this episode, let me just tell you the book is called A Case for Murder, Brittany Murphy Files, and it's available on iTunes, Kobo, Amazon.co.uk, and all other ebook, Kindle stores, or it can be purchased as a paperback at Waterstones, Amazon. It can be ordered by all major book retailers. And it is by, I think his name is Bryn Kurt James Hammond. I'm not sure if his name is actually Brian and if that's pronounced Brian or Bryn. Not to blow my review for next week, but let me just say I enjoyed the book, obviously, enough that it hooked my brain into doing this episode of Brain Scratch. So let's briefly go over the story here about what happened between Brittany Murphy and Simon Monjack. Starting at Wikipedia, Brittany Murphy Monjack, known professionally as Brittany Murphy, was an American film and stage actress, singer, and voice artist. A native of Atlanta, Murphy moved to Los Angeles as a teenager and pursued a career in acting. Her breakthrough role was as Ty Frazier in Clueless, followed by supporting roles in independent films such as Freeway and Bongwater. She made her stage debut in a Broadway production of Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge in 1997, before appearing as Daisy Randoni in Girl Interrupted and as Lisa Swenson in Drop Dead Gorgeous. Some other titles that are big, worth mentioning. She was also in 8 Mile, Sin City, Happy Feet, and she played the voice of Luann on King of the Hill. And let's jump to personal life. So in 2002, she was dating Ashton Kutcher. She then gets engaged to a talent manager. She then gets engaged to a production assistant. And in May of 2007, Murphy married British screenwriter Simon Monjack in a private Jewish ceremony in Los Angeles. For the last 3.5 years of her life, Murphy, her mother, and Monjack lived together in the same house. And that is, obviously, I think for a lot of us, that'd be a bit of a strange situation, but it even gets stranger than that. There is some information out there to suggest that Monjack may or may not have had a relationship with Brittany Murphy's mother, particularly after she died, but, and actually a piece of that even pops up in one of the autopsy reports when we find out that it appears that they may have been sharing a bed because her mother says that one of the nightstands is her side of the bed. So I really don't know what to take from that. There is also a photo shoot that was done with him and his mother-in-law. And some of the photos just, you know, they look like two people that are grieving, admittedly. But some of the photos just strike me a little strange, like this one here. I don't know. I get a feeling from these photos that the potential that there was more going on there certainly exists. In the early 2000s, Murphy lost a large amount of weight, which led to rumors of a cocaine addiction. In June 2005, Murphy disputed such claims to Jane magazine, saying, "No, just for the record, I have never tried it in my entire life." At this point, she had recently signed as the spokesmodel for Jordache Jeans. So her career definitely had some turbulence. She was pretty much an A-list actress for a period of time, and then it's like the industry started pushing away from her. And if you do read the book that I talked about at the start of this episode, you will get some more insight into potentially why that happened. Apparently she was not the easiest person to work with on set. It seems like she was late a lot of the time. She spent a lot of time not just in her dressing room, but in bathrooms in particular. So I think the thoughts and talk about her potentially struggling with some type of drug abuse were certainly swirling around the industry, and that likely impacted some of the jobs that she was getting. The book goes into very good detail about specific jobs that it appears that she lost that might have been related to her image kind of declining. But if you're a fan of Hollywood history at all, you know that an actor on a downward spiral doesn't always bottom out. Quite frequently, people love a comeback story, and people that face these types of challenges make very good fodder for that. So the likelihood, I believe, is very, very strong that Brittany Murphy would have returned to some level of glory, and her fame would have been renewed if she had lived long enough, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Back to Wikipedia on the death. At 8 a.m. on December 20th, 2009, the Los Angeles Fire Department responded to a medical request at the Los Angeles home Murphy and Monjack shared. She had apparently collapsed in a bathroom. Firefighters attempted to resuscitate Murphy on the scene. She was transported to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where she died at 10:04 after going into cardiac arrest. Now, I do have links below for both of the autopsy reports, but we're just going to look at the conclusion page, basically for Brittany's. And you can see here that they are saying it was an accident, community-acquired pneumonia, but with other conditions contributing an iron deficiency, anemia, and multiple drug intoxication. And if you go through this whole report, there is a page that actually shows all the prescription medicine that was found. They ran toxicology reports so you can see what was actually found in her blood. And there did seem to be a combination of prescription and over-the-counter drugs. I have to tell you that when I saw the amount of prescription drugs she was taking, it kind of floored me. To think of someone that is 32, admittedly she had a past, I think she had diabetes that ran in her family, and she had some type of heart defect, but nothing that she should have still been able to have a very long and normal life. And I did look up the medications. One of them appeared to be for treating that type of heart issue, but several of the medications didn't. And you wonder at this point, maybe her drug addiction didn't have anything to do with illegal drugs. It could be that she became addicted to prescription medication, and maybe that's part of what caused her downturn in the industry. What is clear from this autopsy is that the amount of drugs that were in her system certainly contributed to her demise, as well as the fact that she seemed to be battling pneumonia and did not go see a doctor. And it's very plain about that. Now, there is some controversy around these results, and there are some other tests we're going to talk about in a bit. On December 24th, 2009, Murphy was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. Then on May 23rd, 2010, her widower, Simon Monjack, was found dead at the same Hollywood Hills residence. In July 2010, Los Angeles Assistant Chief Coroner Ed Winters stated that the cause of his death was acute pneumonia and severe anemia. So this seems extremely strange, and I have to tell you, after reading through both autopsy reports, the first one for Brittany seems like it was a perfect storm of bad events that helped lead to her demise. So taking a look at Simon Monjack's autopsy report on the conclusion page, We see he is also cited as the immediate cause being community-acquired acute bronchopneumonia. I think they did notice that he had some heart condition issues. There's a little bit of controversy around that because they talked to one of his doctors that said we had given him an EKG, there was no issue with his heart, but his mother-in-law, and I believe he himself, had stated that he was going to get some heart surgery soon because he had a heart attack right before Brittany had died. So it's just another one of those places where the story gets kind of fuzzy. What I also find interesting here is they consider his death to be natural and hers to be accidental, even though they largely died, at least for the immediate cause, of the same thing. Is that just a case of Hollywood spin? I don't know. The other thing that's strange about it is if you go through his report and take a look at all the prescription drugs that were found, it will knock you out of your seat. This guy was taking a ton of drugs. It looked to me like he was actually doubling up on prescriptions, like he would renew a prescription one day, go back the next day, and renew the same prescription again. So how this report comes out as natural and hers comes out as accidental definitely leaves a bit of a question for me personally. And let's just learn a little bit more about Simon here. This is from an article at eOnline News, which is basically taking a look at why people are still reviewing this case so much, even so many years after this happened. George Hickenlooper, director of the movie Factory Girl, for which Monjack received a writing credit, has called Monjack a, quote, con man and a bad guy. In a post on a Hollywood movie blog shortly after his death, Hickenlooper wrote, "I only hope that this creep wasn't instrumental in her sad demise." A list of various misdeeds didn't help Monjack's image. 2 warrants for his arrest in Virginia for alleged credit card theft and fraud, an unpaid $6,087 legal bill, a $502,910 judgment against him by a British investment firm, his reported eviction from 4 different homes. He was jailed in 2007 for overstaying his tourist visa. Murphy reportedly bailed him out. Following his wife's death, Monjack gave an interview to Radar Online to defend himself. Quote, "I think the biggest misconception is that I was living off my wife," he said. "Brittany, forgive me. People don't seem to want to hear it. I was paying the bills. Brittany was making these god-awful films that went straight to DVD, so horrible that she wanted to kill herself." Monjack's comments did little to help his tarnished public image. So not exactly a stand-up guy, and definitely not the type of guy that she was dating previously. I mean, apparently she had a little time she spent with Eminem, Ashton Kutcher, and then she kind of, it seems like she was sliding down the pole, so to speak, of Hollywood talent until she bumped into this screenwriter that has very few credits. There's actually some speculation that perhaps they were together because he was trying to get her to play a role in a new script that he was writing. There's a lot of speculation about the fact that maybe they were not married at all. As a matter of fact, when his mother was contacted about his death, she said he is not legally married as far as she knew, which I honestly still don't know what to believe. If you look at some of the documentation, Brittany Murphy's name is hyphenated with Monjack after it, but is it easy enough for someone to just, tell a police official that that was her last name at the time? Or are they getting that from, DMV records or something? I really have no idea. But I do see that her name is hyphenated in some cases on some of this documentation. It was reported that the Los Angeles County Department of Health had considered toxic mold in their house as a possible cause of the deaths, but this was dismissed by Ed Winter, who stated that there were, quote, no indicators that mold was a factor. Murphy's mother, Sharon, described the reports of mold contributing to the deaths as absurd and went on to state that inspecting the home for mold was never questioned by the health department. In December 2011, Sharon Murphy changed her stance, announcing that toxic mold was indeed what killed her daughter and son-in-law, and filed a lawsuit against the attorneys who represented her in an earlier suit against the builders of the home where her daughter and son-in-law died. Apparently, part of that process, they wanted to get into the house to test it for mold, and she wouldn't allow them to. From what I understand, a report was recovered that was actually from a few months before Brittany Murphy had died, a mold inspection report that said there was none found in the house. The house had since been sold to someone else, so I'm pretty sure another inspection report was run there. If that would have come up positive, I'm pretty sure it would have hit the media and we would have all heard about it. And from what I see, as of about June, the house is actually back up for sale again. On January 11th, 2012, her father, Angelo Bertolotti, applied to the Superior Court of California requesting that the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office be required to hand over samples of his daughter's hair for independent testing. The suit was dismissed on July 19th, 2012, after Bertolotti failed to show up to 2 separate hearings. In November of 2013, Angelo Bertolotti claimed that a toxicology report showed that deliberate poisoning by heavy metals, including antimony and barium, was a possible cause of Brittany Murphy's death. Sharon Murphy described the claim as, quote, a smear. So it's kind of interesting because the way Wikipedia is wording this, it's almost like we are to assume that he's lying about that test even happening. I have bumped into some articles and they say they have experts that have reviewed those tests, but the question of chain of custody still comes up. How do we know that it's Brittany Murphy's hair? How do we know that if it is her hair that it wasn't tainted in some way with these heavy metals? A popular opinion that comes out about these heavy metals being found in her hair is they are very well beyond what would be considered a normal limit, and they could be a sign of poisoning, particularly by either an insecticide or a pesticide, some type of rodent or insect killer. But maybe we can find a little more information to give some more clarification on that. Just in March of this year, the coroner actually spoke out about the possibility of reopening the investigation. And in kind of a weird twist, this video keeps coming up. Apparently there's a show called Hollywood Medium with Tyler Henry, and I watched this clip and I personally found it kind of ridiculous. I don't have anything against psychics or mediums, but in this particular case, and anyone that considers themselves a Hollywood medium, I'm going to be highly suspect of their information because you are in large part reviewing very public lives where it's very easy to get a lot of information. And in this particular video clip, he's sitting there with Jamie Presley and starts talking about, oh, I'm getting this message. I think it's from a friend of yours. First name is B, and I'm seeing Britney Spears. That usually means Brittany. It is so easy to dig out that information. And at least for this clip, there is no pertinent information that is not known if you just do a few simple Google searches. And it kind of made me feel dirty in a weird way. It's not, I don't know. I don't feel very strongly about that video clip. However, if you want to check it out, the extratv.com link in the description box below has it so you can see it for yourself. E asked LA County Assistant Chief Coroner Ed Winter what would it take to reopen the death investigation. We would have to have direct evidence. In all honesty, it would take something like a confession, he said. Something connecting somebody with it. Winter explained they would exhume the body, quote, if law enforcement contacted us, or we can reopen the case if there is substantial evidence. Now, what's a little curious about that is I've also heard law enforcement talk about, well, the coroner has made this determination, so it's out of our hands. We have to close this case. So this gives me a little bit of a sense of the right hand's doing this, the left hand's doing this, and both of them are just making sure no one has to do anything about this case anymore. But I don't know. I leave that to you guys. Quote, I think it could have been preventable, Winter said. The problem is Simon would doctor shop and got numerous medications with numerous names and had a problem with prescription meds. Brittany was sick, and instead of getting her treatment, Simon and her mother didn't take her to the doctor and used an abundance of over-the-counter meds. Another little interesting tidbit, when they went to the house for Simon's death, they also reviewed all the medication that was on Sharon's side of the bed, and some of those bottles said Sharon Monjack. Just once again points to a possible strange relationship going on between a mother and her supposed son-in-law. We're now going to head over to Slate.com with the question, what about these heavy metals found in the hair? If that is true, is there some reasonable explanation for those levels of heavy metals to be found there? And you can see the title of this article was Brittany Murphy Poisoned. An iffy new autopsy report shows she had heavy metals in her hair. Jumping down a little bit, the new question is, are antimony and barium in a decedent's hair conclusive proof of murder? No. Hair dye is the most likely source of heavy metals in a woman's hair. A 2008 study, for example, found that hair dye can lead to elevated levels of manganese, iron, nickel, copper, cadmium, and antimony. Medical examiners typically do not perform hair tests for heavy metals unless there is other evidence to suggest poisoning. Mees lines, white bands that run crosswise on the fingernails and toes, are a classic indicator of heavy metal poisoning. Since the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office didn't order heavy metals testing, it's very unlikely they observed Mees lines or any other circumstantial evidence of poisoning. Now, I did bump into a Nancy Grace segment on this case, and she really drilled into this Mees lines thing. And on the autopsy report, apparently it says that they noticed that her fingernails were very well taken care of and polished. And Nancy Grace's theory was, well, if they didn't wash the polish off, how would they have seen the Mees lines? It didn't even occur to me, but this article makes a very good point. It doesn't have to be the fingernails. They could have also noticed it on the toenails, and there's definitely no indicator that it was noticed in either case on her body. So did the coroner really have a reason to think that she was poisoned? In my gut, at least from what's reported on that paper, it doesn't seem like it. It also goes on to say that there is some misleading statements on the new report. It was produced by the Carlson Company, and it concludes, quote, if we were to eliminate the possibility of a simultaneous accidental heavy metals exposure to the sample donor, then the only logical explanation would be an exposure to these metals, toxins, administered by a third-party perpetrator with likely criminal intent. And then the article goes on to say, only if that explanation could be eliminated, which it clearly cannot since Murphy wore several different hair colors, would he then consider the possibility of deliberate poisoning. So as you can imagine, with this information coming out of potentially deliberate poisoning, there are a lot of eyes and comments headed toward Sharon's direction. I mean, if you consider that there were 3 people living in the house, 2 of them died less than 5 months apart of each other of the same thing, it's looking like one of them may have been poisoned. I think it's pretty easy to see where the easy assumption is in that case. Is it necessarily a true assumption? I still don't know. I still can't tell you guys. There are pieces to this puzzle that still have yet to be answered. For example, if they really think that Brittany Murphy died because of some poisoning and you could detect it by finding heavy metals in her hair, why don't they try to get some of Simon's hair and then test that? And maybe they could handle that whole chain of custody thing a bit better so that the results of that could be disputed less. I haven't seen any information to allude to any of that going on. Admittedly, I believe it would take a family member that would probably be willing to, essentially sue the coroner's department, which is what Brittany's father had to do. But I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. And if Brittany's father spoke to Simon's mother, perhaps that's something that they could work out. But honestly, I don't even know if that court case really produced this result. There is still that question in my head of, because I've seen it reported in 2 different places that he didn't show up for a court date and that essentially dismissed the case. I've also heard people say that the case was voluntarily dismissed by him when he got them to agree to provide the hair sample. So I don't know which way to believe, folks. It's very hard. This is Hollywood. Stories like to get told. And people are not always honest about what's going on there. Image means a lot. To really highlight some of that, I will once again recommend that you check out the book that I read, A Case for Murder, Brittany Murphy Files. There's a lot more that goes on in the book. I'm going to talk to you guys about that on Geek and Dorks Reviews next week. For right now, I turn it over to you. The comment board is all yours. Please let me know your thoughts, theories on this. There's another whole aspect that I really didn't go into. It seemed like someone made up this really whacked out conspiracy theory about Brittany trying to help them in some lawsuit that they had going on with their former employer. Honestly, I really don't feel strongly about it at all, but if you want to discuss it in the comments below, I totally think it's reasonable. And if you want to hear more about it, you can certainly buy the book, which I think has a whole chapter that's kind of dedicated to that part of the story. But it didn't seem like it was anything that had any merit to it, so I didn't really want to pass it your way. But it is out there. Any other theories that you've heard on this case? Let me know. In any instance, this is a sad tragedy. She was a very talented woman. I did also leave 2 clips for you down below. One of her performing for Happy Feet, which she did a voice in, and then her last interview. And it did strike me a little bit that there is certainly a change in her demeanor, particularly from where she is performing in a sound booth to being interviewed the last time that she went to one of her film's premieres. Is it possible that she just had a drink or two too many? It's possible. But she definitely does not seem like the same person from one clip to the next. So I put both of those clips in the description box below so you can check those out as well. And I think that's a wrap on this Brain Scratch. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing day, a great weekend. I'll catch you next week with much more here on the Geek and Dorks channel. Take care, everyone.